All right, welcome to The Explainer. Today we're diving into a problem that, let's be honest, a lot of businesses face. How do you connect your super important SAP system with the files your teams are using every day in Dropbox? We're going to look at the official tool built for exactly this job, the SAP Dropbox Adapter.
Okay, so let's set the scene, right? All your critical enterprise data, your core business logic, it's all locked down inside SAP. Meanwhile, your teams are working fast, they're collaborating, sharing files, and getting things done in Dropbox. And getting info from one to the other, it's usually this manual, painful process. So yeah, the big question is, how do you actually bridge that gap?
And this is where the SAP Dropbox Adapter comes in. Now, we're not talking about some clunky third-party workaround here. This is the official from-the-ground-up solution from SAP. It's designed specifically to create this seamless, automated connection for moving files between the SAP Integration Suite and Dropbox. It's the real deal.
So what exactly is this bridge? Let's zoom out for a second and just look at the big picture of how this thing actually works.
You know, probably the easiest way to wrap your head around it is to think of it like a secure digital pipeline. And the key thing here is that it's not a one-way street. This pipeline goes both ways. It can pull files from Dropbox into SAP, and it can push files from SAP right back out to Dropbox.
Okay, so let's break this down. Starting with that first big job, pulling files from Dropbox. In the adapters world, this is called the sender role, which makes sense because it's sending files from Dropbox over to SAP.
Right off the bat, you've got two main choices. On one hand, you can download file. This is your go-to for just grabbing one specific file. And what's really cool is that it supports wildcards, so you can tell it to, say, grab all the CSV files from yesterday. The other choice is download archive file. This one's awesome. It just grabs an entire folder and bundles everything up for you in one single zip file.
But here's a super important detail you gotta know, kind of the fine print. If you're using that archive option, there are a couple of hard limits coming from the Dropbox side. The whole folder can't be bigger than 20 gigs, and no single file inside that folder can be more than 4 gigs. That's definitely something you need to keep in mind when you're designing your process.
Okay, so your integration runs perfectly. It grabs the file. Now what? What happens to that original file back in Dropbox? You definitely don't want to process it over and over again. This is where post-processing is key. You've got options. You can just delete the file. You can move it to a different archive folder. Or, and this is the default, you can leave it right where it is, but have the adapter mark it as processed, so it gets ignored from now on. You can even tell it to keep the file for the next time, which is super handy for testing.
So how does that Mark as Processed option actually work? Well, it uses this feature with a pretty fancy name, the idempotent repository. It sounds way more complicated than it is. Just think of it as a smart checklist. For 90 days, the adapter keeps a list of every single file it's touched. So if the system reboots or something tries to grab that same file again, the repository just steps in and says, nope, we've already handled that one. It's basically your built-in protection against doing the same work twice.
All right, so we've covered how to get files from Dropbox. Now let's flip that coin and look at the receiver adapter. This is all about taking action inside of Dropbox, with SAP calling the shots.
And this is where you see that the receiver side is way more than just a simple file drop. It's like having a full toolbox for managing your Dropbox space, all controlled from SAP. You can do all the basics, upload, copy, move, delete, but you can also manage folders, like creating new ones or searching inside them. You can even do some intelligence gathering, like fetching a file's metadata, checking its version history, or even seeing how much storage you're using. It's pretty powerful.
This brings us to a classic integration headache, right? You're trying to automate a daily report upload. You tell SAP to push the file, but what happens if yesterday's report is still sitting there with the exact same name? The last thing you want is for your entire automated process to grind to a halt.
And this is where the adapter's flexibility is just brilliant. You get total control over the scenario. You can set it to fail, which just stops everything. You can tell it to ignore the problem and just move on. A really handy one is auto rename, where Dropbox just adds a little number to the new file's name. Or if you're uploading, you can just overwrite the old file. The point is, you get to decide exactly how it behaves.
So it doesn't matter if you're sending files or receiving them. There are a couple of key connection settings you're always going to have to deal with. Let's look at the really important ones.
First things first, security. How do you log in? The adapter uses a modern, really secure method called OAuth2 authorization code. The best way to think of it is like a digital valet key. You give SAP permission to access your Dropbox just one time, and it gets a special secure token. From then on, SAP just uses that token. And here's the best part. SAP never, ever has to know or store your actual Dropbox password. That is a huge security win.
Now, when you're setting up the connection, you're going to see this big number in the settings, 300,000 milliseconds.
And you might be looking at that and thinking, what on earth is that? Well, it's just the default connection timeout. It's how long the adapter will wait for Dropbox to respond before it gives up and flags an error. And 300,000 milliseconds, that's 5 full minutes. It's a pretty generous default, but you can change it to whatever you need.
Okay, we've seen how the adapter works on both ends of the pipe, and we've looked at how to get it connected. So now let's tie it all together and talk about what this really means for your day-to-day workflows.
So what's the big deal? What does this mean for you? It means you can finally automate picking up those daily sales reports your team drops in a shared folder. It means your SAP system can automatically generate and archive important documents right into a secure Dropbox folder, no human needed. And it means you can build really smart integrations that don't just move files around, but can actually search, organize, and manage your cloud storage, all triggered by what's happening in SAP. You're basically replacing manual work with reliable automation.
And that really brings us to the final question, doesn't it? We've established that this adapter is the bridge. It's the secure pipeline. It's the toolbox. So knowing everything it can do, the real question I want to leave you with is this. What's the first manual, error-prone, time-wasting file process at your company that you could completely automate with this tool?